Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, and I am recording to you from right now in a nightmare situation for me, at least, as Nick knows about, as we just spent way too much time trying to figure this out. My computer crashed on a work trip. I am waiting for a new computer, but I was not at home when it was sent, so now I'm dealing with the nightmare of it being sent back to shipper. And in the middle of all that, construction is being done on the house I live in. They're doing a new bathroom and they're turning this whole room apart. And so I don't even have a room to record out of right now. I'm lucky to even get Wi-Fi working on the phone. So I'm holding my phone, recording from there. No mic, no nothing. We want to talk Giants football with you, so we figured we would do it. Nick, how are you doing today? There's a lot to talk about. And in a second, I'll get into what we missed.
I'm in the middle of a move, and somehow I have more stability than you right now.
I don't even mean more stability. Way more stability. I have a nightmare. This situation, I don't even know if I got pulled out an old computer, Nick, to work out of, and it was working fine. Literally until the moment just now when me and you tried to record. Like, I've had no issues with Wi-Fi. I worked out of it. Now Wi-Fi won't hold on this computer. It's like, oh, you want to stream something? StreamYard? No shot. You can't do it. So a lot of nightmares. Quick travel story for you, Nick.
Let's hear it.
Quick travel story. Been on a lot of flights in the last 2 weeks. I think 6 total. So some things that happen on these flights. First of all, I want to start by saying this. Are you in support or not in support of people who clap at the end of a flight?
I'm indifferent. I'm rather ambivalent to that. I don't clap at the end of a flight personally. It's not something I do. I've been around aviation for like the last 3 years, and I have a lot of respect for pilots. But no, if I had to choose, I'd probably say no. But I'm pretty ambivalent to it.
A lot of clapping at the end of these flights, despite minimal to no turbulence throughout any of these flights. So just a little bit of something like, I don't need to clap at the end of a flight, Nick. We got there. Thousands of flights land every day.
Larry David,
you in the news that have crashed lately, but if you look at the actual numbers, it's no more than usual. So it is what it is. But here's the funnier thing that happened to me on one of these flights. So on one of these flights, jam-packed in one of these seats, they pack in like sardines. Thank God, it wasn't any worse than that. But the flight attendant's walking by, Nick, and there's just no room. You don't have a lot of room. So like my bag is like kind of under the seat, but kind of not, you know what I mean? Like in front of you, like your bag is huge. Like you can't really fit it under it. She comes by, she got to put the bag under the seat. You got to put the bag under the seat. So I'm like, all right, I'll put the bag under the seat and I do the best I can. Then, and I've never seen this before, instead of just asking me, which I would have done if she had asked me nicely, and I would have been like, whatever, I don't need to, but I'm fine with it. Like, I had my seatbelt on, Nick, but I don't really tighten my seatbelt all the way through because on my mind, I'm like, if this plane crashes, I don't think a seatbelt's going to really help me survive this thing. I think I'm in a lot more trouble than that. And a seatbelt can't really do anything in my mind. I don't really understand a seatbelt on plane. I never really will. I guess it's so you don't jolt ahead.
100%. Yeah. No, there's a lot of utility in a seatbelt on a plane.
Okay, so this is just something I never really thought about. Now I should know that. But I feel like either way, if your seatbelt is on, you're probably not going to be removed from the seat. That's my personal opinion. Anyway, instead of just asking me nicely, which I would have done if she had just asked me, she actually reached her hand down and fully tightened the seatbelt. She didn't like how it was. Yeah, no, she was not. She was an older lady, and she didn't like how it was like too loose, I guess. She just tightened the seatbelt for me. I've never seen that before. It's a wild move. It's like
that's a power move, man. She asserted her dominance over you, bro.
She asserted her dominance, dude. That's a fucking power move. I've never seen that before. Like, again, if she had said, like, can you tighten your seatbelt? It's a little too loose. I would have probably side-eyed, but I would have done it. But just to actually go down and do it.
Dude, you're a 30-something-year-old man, and that's crazy, dude.
Insane.
She treated you like a toddler.
And here's my final plane story, and we're going to get to the content in a second. Okay. Nothing makes me more pet peeve. You want to clap at the end of a flight? Fine. I don't support it. I'm not for it, but it doesn't bother me really that much at all. I just thought it'd be funny to bring up. But this really does bother me. Okay. End of a flight, the plane lands. The people who are behind you in a seat who get up immediately, then jam as far forward as they can into your row to be like, instead of waiting, you know how the plane has to fucking board, and the people in front of you, got to wait for the people. The people are rushing to get out, and then they get in front of you. Now they're in the aisle, and they're all on top of you. Their clothes are on you. So we got to a point where this guy, he was pissing me the fuck off. The plane had landed. It was like another, you know how it goes. I was in row 32. So we had plenty of time to go before we needed to stand up from our seat. seats and like worry about it. But of course, he's from the back and he needs to get off this plane. Him and his wife, they need to get off this plane. So they have all their luggage with them from their overhead, and it's all jammed up. Their backpacks are in the way. And those are tight area between each row. It's a tight area. And so now he's jamming up in there. So now he's just standing to my side with his fucking jacket on me, like flopping on my face for like 15 minutes as they wait for the people to get ahead. And I got so angry that like I flipped it off of him. I flipped it off of me at one point. And then I just put my arm behind him, plopped it on the row behind, and used it as a blocker. I was like, no one else behind me is getting past this row until every fucking row ahead of them is off this plane. I just had enough of it, Nick. Like, those people to me are actually the worst people. People don't like people who like line up early for a flight to like so they can get on, and it's like the big line in front as you board. No, that's not as bad as the people who are, or when the plane lands, they can't wait for everybody in front of them to board. Your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on that is those people more than likely had a connecting flight.
They did not. Oh, here's how. Oh, this is the final funny part of the story. This is how I know they didn't have a connecting flight. This was on the way home from Dominican Republic. And the best part of this whole thing, when you got off the flight, you have to go back through customs at the end. You're at Newark Airport. And it's this insanely long line. So the best part of this to me, when I got to the line at the end goes to like, there's 10 different agents who will take you. Right behind these two people at the end. I was right behind them at the very end. And I was just laughing in my head. Like, you did all that to get nowhere.
Wow. Oh, yeah. So they didn't even have a connecting flight. Yeah. They're
no connecting flight. People. No connecting flight. It's their world and we're just all living it. That's my whole thing. And I'll end the story with this, Nick. I just don't like people who act like it's my world. You're just all living in it. And that's what I think you're acting like. If you're the type of person who just says, I can get ahead of all these people who are ahead of me on the flight to get off the flight because you know what? It's my world and they're just here.
No, 100%. Yeah, it's very selfish of them.
Okay. Anyway, let's talk about the Giants. Let's talk about some news. While I was gone, and I know you've been moving in the process of that, the Giants did not get a deal done with Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, despite attempts from the Giants, a report actually from Rich Eisen said that the Giants met the Rams' asking price as far as trade compensation goes. We don't know what that was. My assumption to you, Nick, though, because I know we talked about this last week and you discussed where you were at with it and what you would have want. My assumption is it would have been more than the 2 3s. I think it would have involved pick 34 in this draft. So you know what? We can rest our hats. We didn't get Stafford. We can rest our hats that we didn't give up that 34th pick. Who knows what else would have been in that trade, and who knows for sure if that would have been. Also, according to this report from Rich Eisen, the Giants met Stafford's asking price for a contract. So it's clear the Giants would have signed Stafford for at least what the Rams are going to give him on this new deal. That's one thing we can know. But he did not go to the Giants. So your first thoughts on the Giants missing out on Matthew Stafford?
I'm not surprised that the Rams wanted to retain Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is a top 10 quarterback. He's well respected. The Rams are in a place right now where, yes, they are younger, but they still have a good enough foundation where they can compete. Who is going to have you compete better than Matthew Stafford at this point? Is it going to be Jimmy Garoppolo? Would it have been Sam Darnold? I'm unsure of that. So I think retaining Matthew Stafford was smart from a Rams standpoint. So I'm not surprised they didn't allow him to come out to New York. Now, my reaction for the New York Giants is this was the first move that I wanted just because I knew it would have put the Giants in a position to be successful. But what was contingent on us getting Matthew Stafford, for me, it would have been those like a 2 3s, and maybe next year's 2, and not the 34th. And I would have been okay, I think, making a commitment for the money that Matthew Stafford was looking for, although it can be perceived as desperate, which it is, because I don't know if you guys have watched the New York Giants for a while. They're very desperate right now. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, one of the reasons why Dan and I wanted Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll to not have their jobs retained is because we knew that it would breed a sense of desperation. So we're in desperation land right now. I thought Matthew Stafford would have made this team competitive. That did not happen. And now we have to turn the page, Dan, to something else. And what is it going to be? I could say this, though. Because again, I wasn't fully invested in the Matthew Stafford sweepstake. He was my number one. But as we said to preface last podcast, look, we don't love any of these options because the Giants are in such a shitty spot right now. We understand that there is a lot of desperation. Now we don't need to part ways with a lot of draft capital to go get a player like Matthew Stafford, and the Giants will have more cap room to maneuver. And there are other names we're going to go through on this podcast that will be much cheaper than Matthew Stafford would have been.
Yeah, for sure. I think the way I look at it, Nick, is I'm not really all that disappointed. Even though you and I were in on Stafford, assuming the price was right. I'm not so sure there was a scenario where the price was right, to be honest with you. There was probably a bigger price than we originally thought. And this is not something that was ever going to devastate me to not get, right? Like, I was devastated last year when we won our way out of Drake May and Jaden Daniels. I was. I felt that way throughout, and I'll never change that opinion. This was never going to be devastating because in the end, what we missed out on, while I believe and you believe it would have been good for us, it would have been good for the podcast, and it would have been good for the Giants, it also was a risky proposition. Trading for someone at that age with his injury history and then signing him for that kind of money when you're not a team that's completely ready to compete just yet. So with all those things in mind, it doesn't kill me. We keep the 34th pick and we get to look forward to that draft pick. And it is essentially a first round pick, especially in this class, especially if the Giants use it in the correct fashion. So we pivot our attention, Nick, with that to other rumors. One from Big Blue Interactive from, according to Eric from BBI, a source that's been right on a lot of stuff. And that source suggests, and by the way, Pretty Rick, you remember him from Twitter, Nick, from last year? He also tweeted this out in a separate tweet. I'm not sure if you saw this. Yep, he tweeted out that the Giants have made an offer, a strong offer for Aaron Rodgers to sign with the New York Giants. Very, very controversial player. Like, you thought the Stafford thing was controversial on Giants Twitter. My God, is the Rodgers thing controversial on Giants Twitter anytime I tweet about it. And, you know, the idea in mind would be if you can get Rodgers, you can probably also get Davante Adams to come along with him. Now you have a similar situation to what you would have had with Stafford and Kupp, but you're getting a worse downgrade at quarterback, most likely. Who knows if he can ever kind of revive what he had, but upgrade at receiver, I think, is pretty obvious there from Kupp to Adams, and I don't think it's really even remotely close. And then, you know, at the same time, you're not giving up any draft capital to do this. And now Davante might require like a late trade, a late pick swap, if anything, with the Jets. But what are your thoughts on this rumor?
So I think adding Davante Adams, I want to start there, for Malik Nabers would be sensational. What Davante Adams could impart on Malik Nabers is something Giant fans should look forward. But we have to look at this in its totality. Again, Giants are in a very desperate spot. I don't know what move the New York Giants can make right now that will lead to Joe Shane and Brian Dable having a job in 2026. I think that's just the reality of the situation for the New York Jets. I don't think they're going to win enough games, depending on how John Mara is judging their success. I don't know if they can win enough games. So is Aaron Rodgers going to save their jobs? I'm not certain of that. But with that said, we're operating in this reality that this could just be a lame duck year. The Giants are somewhat punting at the moment, right? Like, I hate that. Do I think Aaron Rodgers would make the Giants possibly playoff competitive? I think there is a possibility that that can happen 1 year removed from the Achilles, but this is a 42-year-old quarterback we're talking about here. Does that really inspire anything for you? Not necessarily, but he's still the best quarterback we've had since Eli Manning. I wouldn't throw a fit if the Giants did this, to be honest with you. I think the players, and I'm speaking out of my ass right now, they'll say that I don't know this for a fact, but I haven't heard many players, former teammates of Aaron Rodgers, chastise Aaron Rodgers. I haven't heard that too much, right? A lot of it is media-driven type of criticism of Aaron Rodgers, and that does matter to me. And that might be controversial to say, but that does really matter to me. So if you're telling me, hey, this season, it might be a punt session, which our reality suggests that's probably what it's going to be, Dan. I hate that, but it's probably going to be. This would be at least an exciting reality to live in and to cover, although it is somewhat circus-like, which is like, does John Mara really want to invite that into the New York Giants atmosphere? Because that's kind of been related to the New York Giants recently, especially after Hard Knocks last year. This has kind of been somewhat of a circus. I would sign off on it, though, depending on the price. And I think it would make the Giants a better football team. I just don't know if it's good enough to actually make a dent, right? Like, going forward. Now, it would be Aaron, and it would be a quarterback in the draft too. It's just, where would that quarterback come from? And that's something else we could talk about through this podcast.
I think there's a lot to unpack with what you just said and just the entire situation. Certainly the reality that you mentioned that the Giants might be living would be better than my current reality. As you see all this clutter, they've turned this room into a fucking disaster zone as they're redoing the bathroom and adding a kitchenette.
It really looks like Bo Burnham's inside. It looks like the background of Bo Burnham's inside.
Yeah, it's just everything in this room was just pushed to a side as they redo. This is a nightmare. But the reality the Giants will be living in, Nick, there's a lot to unpack from that reality. So I'll start by saying this because I've tweeted a lot about Rodgers. I think that the first thing I want to say, Nick, is this, and why he's my favorite option currently. And of course, I agree. It would consider signing him would give us the opportunity to, and I hope the Giants would still consider drafting a quarterback in any spot in this draft. But the first reality of this is, if you look across this market, sure, you could say, like, most likely outcome, and I agree with this, Nick, is that Aaron Rodgers won't be amazing as a quarterback next year. But the only possibility of all these players that are available to them now that Stafford is gone, of actually having a great quarterback, is still Aaron Rodgers, because it's not impossible a year off the Achilles to refine that form. Brett Favre went to the Vikings for that final year, got all the way to the NFC Championship game, and he needed a catastrophe in the form of Bountygate to lose that game, essentially, is the only reason they lost, and there was also some bad calls in that game. So it's not like impossible. Jameis Winston will not find that form, right? Russell Wilson, in my opinion, will not find that form. I know he had that form at some point, but that form involved an amazing defense and a lot of play action with shots downfield. Rodgers at one point was actually an elite quarterback, throwing the football and leading through the air. And that's something that, with the rest of what's around, is there. Second thing, like you said, I don't personally buy, I'm with you, I don't personally buy the narrative that he's this toxic, horrible teammate. I know that's the narrative. I know I see that every time I tweet, because people read these reports, these unnamed sources. Garrett Wilson's demanding a trade, someone told me. I said, where? Find me that. Is there proof of it? Or did somebody write about it in The Athletic from an unnamed source? And like, regarding the quarterback thing, people are like, you can't sign Rodgers because then you can't draft a quarterback because he's not a good mentor. Really? I heard the opposite when Zach Wilson was there. And then last year, Tyrod Taylor was there. He doesn't need to mentor Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor doesn't want him to mentor him, right? Like, they're not at that point of that career. There's no example of that. There's no opportunity for that. So I don't buy as much the off-field stuff. Would he be annoying to the media? Would things like that happen? If they're losing, yeah. But if they're winning, I guarantee I could hear already in my head Aaron Rodgers saying, I'm just having fun playing football again. It feels good to have fun playing football again. And as far as if he's bought in or not, Nick, if he signs with the Giants, I'm convinced that he's bought in. He's bought into wanting to stick it to the Jets, for saying that he was done, for telling him, because, he wanted to stay there. And they told him, we don't want you back. And so that to him would piss him off, might motivate him. So I think those narratives, all those things could be wiped away if he could help them win football games, and if they do actually win football games. And I'm not saying that's the likeliest scenario, Nick, but I am saying, as far as the scenarios that are available to the Giants at quarterback right now, his has the highest upside by far.
And that's how you have to look at this, unfortunately, because the Giants have backed themselves into such a bad and desperate corner when it comes to the quarterback position. What is the most likely path out of it? And we're sitting here talking about a 41, almost 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers being the most likely path out of that. That's not because Dan and I are fully bought in on Aaron Rodgers being a successful quarterback with the 2025 New York Giants. That's because of the reality of the freaking situation the New York Giants are in. That's how you have to view this entire situation. And I'm with you, man. Aaron Rodgers is probably my number one option right now, especially if you pair him with either a rookie or bring in someone like Fields. I don't know if you have enough cap space to do that. I don't know how much Aaron Rodgers is going to dictate on the open market either. So those are still very important questions that I don't have answers to. And I have not watched the all 22 from the 2024 season of Aaron Rodgers, but I watched enough Jet games to know that he still does have an arm, and he still can throw with anticipation. He still has glimpses, and I would say more than just flashes, of being an elite quarterback. And I'm going to hitch my wagon to that. And if it comes with all of these other distractions and all this other stuff, we can bring that too. Look, Aaron Rodgers took on the media, right? He has called out the media several times. High people within the NFL media landscape he has called out personally. There's going to be a lot of stories about him wherever he goes. That's something that New York Giants have to be aware of, that's not going to go away when Aaron Rodgers comes here. And if Aaron Rodgers is still quiet, I think there still could be a contentious relationship between the media and Aaron Rodgers. So there might be a quote unquote distraction when it comes to Aaron, but I don't know if that's Aaron being I don't think that's Aaron being a bad teammate. I think that's Aaron's past and his overall relationship through the years with the NFL media specifically. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Look, we all love to work out. The summer's coming around. You want to look good in your bathing suit. But in order to enhance your workout, you want to go and use MitoPure from Timeline. This is a great product. When I started using it, it makes me feel stronger, gives me more energy. I recover quicker. I'm in my 30s. I still have the energy to work out. And if you want that energy, you really should give Timeline's MitoPure a shot and work it into your routine. This The great year of 2025 is your year to be the best, most energized, most revitalized you. MitoPure promotes cellular renewal and mitochondrial health to address common signs of aging at the root. MitoPure is the research-backed innovation that unlocks your fullest potential. Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com/banter. It's timeline.com/banter. That's TIMELINE.
And guess what? Let's think about it from this perspective. We haven't had this distraction in the media from the quarterback position in 6 years. Daniel Jones. Where the fuck did that get us? Nowhere. This shit is so overblown in general when it comes to, can you handle the Giants media? Just win football games, throw football on time, and help everybody win by actually playing the position that you're paid to do at a high level. And again, I'm not saying Rodgers is a lock to do that, but I sure as hell know he's a better chance to do it than what the Giants have had and that what is available to them. And on the front of him helping quarterbacks, you can make all you want about him being this selfish guy. I guarantee you, dude, if you draft a quarterback right now and you're the Giants, let's say it's Jackson Dart in round 2 or Tyler Shuck in round 3 or whatever it may be, Cam Ward if you get lucky at 3 or Shador even at 3, who, by the way, I believe would be fine sitting 1 year behind Aaron, even though some people have question marks about that. I think that quarterback, Nick, would learn a lot more from just being behind Rodgers for every dropback, watching his tendencies, letting him use all of the knowledge that he's accrued over this many years that he's played in the NFL, not just, from a mental standpoint as they evaluate film together, but also, again, just like training camp. How do you do your job? When do you take a different, like all these little nuances and tendencies of playing the quarterback position, or he's going to learn so much more from Rodgers than, let's say, Jameis Winston or even Justin Fields, if we were to sign him instead, for example, and all these other possible quarterbacks they could sign. Honestly, I say even Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson, to me, he's a great quarterback. Again, like not necessarily the quarterback I personally would want a quarterback learning from, in my opinion. And so I think that outweighs the possible media distraction bullshit and all the stuff we've heard.
I 100% agree. And Aaron Rodgers, again, people say he's a bad teammate. I don't buy that. And I think you brought up a great point with the Zach Wilson situation and how he helped Zach Wilson just kind of come along as a young developing player. And look, Aaron's like 42. He's going to be 42 or whatever.
Right.
Like, I don't think he has delusions of grandeur that the New York Giants are going to give him some 5-year contract. He understands the reality that he is at the tail end of his career. But if he could still play at a high level at the tail end of his career, I'm not going to say, no, I don't want to bring Aaron Rodgers in because of some things that the media said about him. So me personally, I'm more so hitching my wagon to this as my number one option now that Stafford is gone, because everything that you said before, I believe that Aaron Rodgers gives the Giants the best chance to win of all the quarterback options that they have, unless they go 3 and someone falls to them like a Cam Ward, which is something else we'll talk about on this podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah. Or the possibility.
And even then, like, I'm sorry to cut you off, but even then, like if Cam Ward, he's going to be a rookie, there's going to be a lot of freaking growing pains. And the Giants are going to lose, and then they're going to get rid of people, and they're going to bring people in, and hopefully those people love Cam Ward. And it's that situation. They could love Cam Ward because Cam Ward is a good quarterback, but at the same time, they might not. And then the next thing you know, it's like 3 years down the line, and the Giants still haven't figured out the quarterback position, and they're turning over. It just could be an absolute nightmare from that standpoint, right? But that's another conversation.
Yeah. And to be clear, what Nick and I are discussing is our best and favorite option right now of what's available before the draft. When the draft comes, that changes a lot, and it's a whole different animal. And we may be on board with trading up to number 1 overall. We haven't discussed that yet on this pod. We will discuss that at some point on this podcast, in general. So it's like this is just what's available to them right now. As we enter this new league year, we have the franchise tag deadline coming up, I believe today, Nick, or tomorrow. And then the new league year by next Monday, well, that's the legal tampering period. We'll know that this Giants-Rodgers thing is real, and it's going to start to happen. And that's when things really heat up for us as Giants fans and in general, just for the way that we're going to see the construction of this roster. But one more thing on what you mentioned earlier, I've heard people say that if you bring in Rodgers and that means you bring in Adams, which I would very much want to do, by the way, it's bad for Malik Nabers. I completely disagree. I don't think Nabers is a guy who's going to complain about the targets. Personally, I think I think Dable's proven he's still going to find a way to get Malik Nabers targets. I think Rodgers is a smart enough quarterback that while Adams, I think, would eventually ultimately lead the Giants in targets next year, that would be a bold prediction of mine over Malik Nabers. Nabers would still have enough targets. And more importantly, as I mentioned with the Rodgers, the rookie quarterback thing, there's so many things that Nabers can learn from Adams from a route running standpoint and from a release package standpoint off the line of scrimmage that will be invaluable for him this year and for the rest of his career. And that way outweighs possibility of, are there enough targets to go around?
100%, dude. Yeah, I brought that up. That was like one of the first things I wanted to address. Could you imagine Davante Adams teaching the nuances of playing wide receiver to Malik Nabers? How cool that would be. And Malik has that type of personality where he would be receptive to that, in my opinion. People will be like, oh, Malik. No. Malik has a lot of, like, if you listen to some of the things he said about veteran receivers, about Cooper Kupp and other receivers around the league, he has a lot of reverence for players who really understand the art of running routes. What wide receiver who is in the NFL right now understands and embodies the art form of route running other than freaking Davante Adams, right? Like Davante Adams, Justin Jefferson, like those are those types of guys. And Davante would impart that wisdom on Malik Nabers, and that young buck would learn so much from Davante, bro.
Especially the release. As far as releases off the line of scrimmage, still might be the number one in the NFL. And that's something that we said when we went into this. Remember, we talked about, like, just when we did our player profile on Nabers, like there were some drops in his college profile. We'll see about that. And then if he just, his release off the line of scrimmage is the one thing that he can work on and maybe become more elite on. And that's something that, by the way, could also work and help Jalen Hyatt. That's a guy who also needs work on that kind of thing. And that's something that Davante Adams can also, be a helpful factor for. I don't want to give up on that asset just yet, personally.
This is such a young wide receiver. Like, dude, think about like anything that you've done in your life when somebody who is in your field, right? And they are the best at it. And everybody looks at him and they're like, oh man, I have so much respect for that. And then that guy comes into your building, onto your team, and he wants to teach you his art form. Like, you shut up and you listen when you're young. You're like, oh my God, he's around. That's what Davante Adams would do for Wandale, Hyatt, and Malik Nabers.
Yeah, without a doubt, Nick. So that's just something that we feel strongly on as far as, their impact on the team and what it could be. We'll see what happens on the Rodgers front. Again, there's rumors that the Giants already made an offer. I can see it making sense for Rodgers. He bought a house here last year with the Jets. He might want to stick it to the Jets. And despite what people say in Giants land, I still think Brian Daboll is very revered among quarterbacks and players in the NFL. They believe that he's somebody they would want to work with. I know some Giants fans see the videos of him yelling at Jones and throwing the tablet when Jones throws another pick six, and they're like, how can anyone want to work with this guy? But it's like, I don't know if that's necessarly true, to be completely honest.
I could already see week 4 though. Aaron Rodgers, Brian Dable going at each other's throats. Media would have a field day with that.
They're two hotheads. Like, it's not a guarantee. Like, it would have to work. Let me be clear. They'd have to be throwing the ball the way they want to and moving the offense the way they want to.
Of course. That's the thing. Like, what's the likelihood for it to work? Dan and I are not saying, oh, it's over 50% that this is going to work, right? But again, we're in this desperate land where, like,
exactly. People are so mad at this idea of Rodgers. It's like, dude, what else are we gonna do? You think there's like an easy way out of this? There's like, we're on a look. We're going for a fucking inside straight. Do you want to make it a gut shot straight? I mean, for an open-ended straight. You want to make it a gut shot straight? Do you want to make it like we're going for 3 outs, 2 outs? We can get lower on our outs. We're trying to give ourselves as many outs as possible, using a poker reference, to hit this draw that we need to win this hand. And we believe that, again, it's not a lot of outs, but Rodgers' scenario may give them the most outs potentially. And for me, it's not necessarily all about, Nick, the most outs to win games, because I don't really see a Super Bowl in our future for 2025. To me, it's the most outs to get our offense moving in a direction where the defense can actually go out there and breathe a little bit and rush with their ears pinned back. And so we don't have to go into another locker room like we've been in so often over the last 6 years, where it's like the defense is carrying the offense again. Are they happy? Are both sides? The defense said the right things to the media, but are they really okay with the situation? The offense get off the field all the time. They can't throw the ball anywhere. There's no passing touchdowns. There's no explosive passing plays. And then we punt or whatever may happen. We can't go back into that scenario and expect that this locker room will stay together, because not only will they lose Dable and Shane, Nick, they could lose everything from a culture standpoint they built if this offense can't function again from a passing standpoint.
I'm so glad you brought up that point specifically on how the offense and the defense, they are two separate entities. They're part of one team, but they're two separate entities. And there's no doubt, if you were to ask a defender and put truth serum in their coffee or something and then ask them, hey, did you resent the offense last year? I guarantee they'd say, of course. Dude, we would do 3 and out. We forced 3 and outs and then be right back out there 3 plays later. If you have a quarterback who can keep an offense on script, that's not going to happen. That's going to allow Dex and Brian Burns and Kayvon, if he's still there, and some of these other players to be be rested enough to actually pin their ears back, rush the passer. As you said, Giants could drop 7, drop 8, rush 3, rush 4, whatever they got to do to get home. But these guys are going to be fresh when it matters most if the offense can actually pick up their end of the couch.
Yep, no doubt about it. And I think Nick specifically is referring to the games before the injuries on defense with Lawrence and those players. And obviously, the defense in the second half wasn't good.
That doesn't even need to be said. We're talking about
we're talking about the potential of this team. We're not going to talk about the injured version of them at the end. We're talking about what we saw early when they shut down Joe Burrow and the Bengals and things of that nature. All right, Nick. And so we've talked about Stafford. They're moving on from that. Maybe they're moving toward Rodgers. A lot of reports out there that they've have a deal out there and it could be signed early in free agency. We'll see. But I have also read, Nick, that if they strike out on Aaron Rodgers, they will be making the move to sign Russell Wilson. So it seems clear, Nick, that maybe Jameis Winston, who was early rumored, might not be in the mix. And Giants are looking for a different kind of player, more veteran, give them a chance to win this year type player. So if we did, shift our attention to Russell Wilson, where would you be at on that front?
Again, there's not a lot of great options out there right now. Russell Wilson, according to Spotrac, I think he's set to make I don't know, it's a lot of money, over 40, around 40, it could be even more than that, which is a lot of freaking money for Russell Wilson at this point of his career. So money wise, I don't even know, the Giants are desperate enough to where they might have to pay a player like Russ. That I liked what Russell Wilson was able to do for those first 5 or 6 games with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had that offense humming. Once George Pickens got hurt, they essentially fell apart. They didn't score 20 points for the final 5 games that they were out there, Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers, that offense, right? So that's an issue. I love how he throws a deep ball. I think him and Malik Nabers would be a lot of fun. He was one of the best deep ball passers outside the numbers in the entire league. He might have been the best according to Pro Football Focus's grades. I think that the Giants would challenge vertically with Russell Wilson as their quarterback. He is quick enough as a processor to operate quick game. I don't love him targeting over the middle of the field as much as some of the other quarterbacks because of his physical limitations, being 5'11". But at this point, man, yeah, I would say that's the direction we're going in, and I'm okay with that. I think he might be the second best option behind Aaron Rodgers. I don't really know who else would be if we're talking about trying to win in 2025, which we know Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll desperately are trying to do.
Yeah, I think you laid out basically exactly where I feel on this, Nick. While I am somewhat concerned about the price tag you mentioned, I don't really care because it's going to be short-term money, and the short-term cap situation for the Giants is, in my mind, very meaningless. The Giants, from a short-term cap standpoint, have nothing to worry about. They are completely healthy. If you told me, look, we're signing Russ for a 5-year deal with X amount guaranteed, and push into 2027 and 28. Now I'm worried. I'm like, shit, I don't want cap on Russ late in these years, but early cap, we're fine. We don't have anyone signed. People have to understand the Eagles have 13 players. The 49ers have 14 players. The Chiefs have 15 players under contract on multi-year deals, and they're making it work. We have 3 or 4 guys. So we have the flexibility that people don't realize at any point that we can tap into. We haven't tapped into it yet. Shane, which I think is actually smart, is not using void years yet. The Giants are one of only 2 teams that are not using void years from a contract standpoint. Why? Because he doesn't have to. We're not competing yet for a Super Bowl. We don't need to. But if he needs to, he will. And he mentioned that at the combine. He made mention of, I could change my strategy on void years when needed. So Giants have all these tricks of the trade they can still use from the cap. What you really need to look for, in my mind, in general, when you're thinking about the cap, how healthy your team is with the cap, Nick, moving forward, is how many guys do you have signed under contract for the future? Just look at that and compare it to the teams like the Chiefs, the Niners, the Eagles. And if you see 12, 14 players of their teams and only 3, 4, 5 on yours, just understand that you don't need to worry about 45 million here, 45 million there on a short-term basis. So if that's my standpoint on Russ from contractually. As far as the rest of it goes, I think he'd help Nabers on the deep ball. I think he'd help Hyatt maybe become a part of this offense. I think we'd be limited as a passing offense, though. We wouldn't really get a rhythmic over-the-middle field passing game that I've been looking forward to for 6, 7 years, and I just don't know when I'll ever get that, Nick. Most teams don't have it, though. I have to ground myself when I talk about this, Nick, because I just think about watching so much NFL, and I know you're the same boat with me. I don't see this most places. There's not a lot of rhythmic passing games in the NFL that utilize in breakers in the middle of the field and the outs and look good. It's very, 4, 5, 6 passing games in the NFL can get that going. So you hope at one point will be that, but I don't necessarily think that will be a Russell Wilson.
Yeah. So it's, again, another option that Dan and I were like, yeah, all right. I don't want to say we're ho-hum on it, but it's It's the reality of where we're at right now. I don't know what other course of action. Like the Giants are the most desperate team in the NFL to land a quarterback right now. Everybody knows that. And that also is going to bleed into the NFL draft. But everybody is aware of how desperate the Giants are, how desperate Joe Shane is, how desperate Brian Dable is. Not a great situation to find yourself in, Bob, being this desperate, but that's just the reality of the situation. So I think Aaron is the number one right now. And then I guess Russ would be number two. I don't know what other quarterback on the market. What other quarterback, let's do this real quick before we get out of here. What other quarterback on the market do you think Brian Dable and Joe Shane would realistically feel comfortable with as their starter?
So that's a great question.
Now, the Darnold one is very interesting because of the money and the longevity of that contract. So, but let me get your answers on that, because it is an interesting thought experiment.
So they're prioritizing it. I'll just start by saying this. They're prioritizing what they want in a quarterback a little bit differently than I am. And I never really am sure where you're at. I'll get your opinion on this after to find out. I've made this clear, but I'm prioritizing a quarterback that can utilize all areas of the field and get our passing game going. I'm not as much prioritizing quarterback that can win them as many games as possible in 2025. I don't personally care as much as others do about what our win total. If we win 8 games versus 7 or 9 versus 6, I'm not as worried about that. Now, for them, their jobs are on the line. So that's why they have a Russell Wilson over a Jameis Winston, even if Russell doesn't maybe use the field as well, because he's smarter and all the things. He doesn't turn the ball over. So we're now looking for that, to answer your question. What would be the next thing from Russell Wilson down? Is it Darnold? It's not Winston, I don't think, in their minds again. Is it Derek Carr if he breaks free, right? Is he somebody who might be coming to the picture if the Saints decide to move on from, which again is open in the air. We don't really know what the situation is. I think of all the ones currently available, it would possibly be Darnold. And the Vikings have made the decision not to franchise tag him. So he will hit the open market, Nick. And now it's a matter of who's interested and what his market actually is.
So now I want to ask you this question. Since Darnold's name came up, which I was pretty certain it would, do you think John Mara gets involved with that type of decision, bringing in a quarterback, a face of the franchise, somebody who did fail in New York previously, on a 5-year deal? Like, how much do you think? Like, Mara has to have his fingerprints on this to some degree, right? So, specifically with a long-term investment, and the only quarterback that really is on the market that you can, plausibly say is going to earn a long-term 5-year type of deal is Sam Darnold. So, how much do you think Mara factors into this?
He factors big time when I think you're right when it comes to a big decision like that. Like, are we going to make this guy? It's also why I don't think he's really in the picture, Darnold, unless his market fizzles out to the point where he's accepting a 1 or 2 year deal to try to get his value up. But if you're Sam Darnold's agent and if you're Sam Darnold, I don't think you look at it like we need another prove it year. We just had the best possible prove it year we could ever have.
Seriously.
And from an everything standpoint of the Vikings, it didn't end well, but it's very hard to imagine it's going to go better than that. So he has to probably take what he can get on a multi-year deal. I don't think the Giants are going to be the team that gives him that.
No, neither do I. If say his market would dry up for some reason, the Titans aren't interested, and it is like a 2-year deal he's looking at, that's where I will buy in. I just don't want to hitch my wagon. I don't want the Giants to hitch their wagon to Sam Darnold for 5 years, just because I don't know if I trust what's going on in between the ears with him. I know I've talked a lot about his physical talent, his ability to throw, his arm talent overall, his mobility. I really appreciate a lot of that, but I can't trust Sam Darnold on a 5-year deal, especially at what happened at the end of last season, how he faltered against the Lions, and then what happened in the playoffs ultimately.
Yeah. Okay. We'll wrap up there on the veterans. We'll talk about some possibilities in the draft, some rumors on that front in a future pod. So keep it locked in, little Big Blue Banter. We're also going to do some more podcasts coming up. Nick and I have been grinding some tape on Cam Ward. We'll do something on him next week, most likely, or at the end of this week. We have free agency coming up, so it's going to be hot and heavy. I want to do something soon, Nick, where we look at 5 prospects you've evaluated so far that have intrigued me. I'm going to do some research on those guys too, and we'll talk about them as possibilities for the Giants. So keep it locked and loaded. More content coming your way. And as you know, as we head into this busy time with free agency and the draft coming up, we'll have some more people on, some interviews, some guests like we always do. So hopefully by the end of this week, Nick, I have my whole setup back as far as the computer goes. I don't know if I'm ever getting this room back for another feels like I thought I was going to go away and come back and it was done, which was a mistake. So who knows on that front, but I'll at least have a computer by then, we hope. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your week and we'll talk to you soon.